Are you ready for Black Friday? I'm just sitting here vibe sessioning, right? Christia Freeland is using the word vibe session, and she says, oh, lots of economists are talking about the vibe session. And I'll explain to you what the heck the vibe session is. And it's really just a way to blame anything but their ridiculous, awful inflationary policies for inflation. Right? It's got to be COVID. It's got to be the supply chain. It's got to be Walmart being greedy. It's got to be Galen Weston. It's actually just printing money and being irresponsible with your monetary fiscal policy. But they don't want to admit that. And so they say Vibesession. And so we'll talk about that. More people are illegally crossing the border from the United States into Canada than the pandemic. Then we should just change the laws and stop them from doing that. If they do that, we arrest them, put them in a paddy wagon, and send them back over to the United States. Say, bye-bye, never come back, enjoy your Trump years, and all the rest, right? And I mean, lucky them. Lucky them. Maybe not if they're under Trump, because he might deport them. And, well, lucky them, because at least they're not spending 10 years in kind of limbo, right? Walmart is rolling back DEI policies, so that's good. There's a pressure campaign. There's one guy who seems to be running the pressure campaign, and I don't know if it's just him, but he's kind of a mousy looking dude. I should have tagged his thing, but he ran the campaign against Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch, and he ran the campaign against John Deere and a bunch of tractor companies. And now he's got Walmart to agree to roll back their DEI policies. So he's quite successful. And it's just what they do is they boycott the company, and the company sees sales drop and they're like, oh crap. And then this guy comes in and says, yeah, we're doing this and we can stop as soon as you stop. So it's very, very interesting. Leverage, right? Speaking of leverage, well, we'll talk about Trump's tariffs in just a sec. The liberals want to censor the internet to fight crime. So we've got Arif Varini, who's the Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada, talking about how we need to get Bill C-63 passed, and the conservative Nazis are holding up the Parliament because they want those documents that the angel liberals refuse to hand over, right? So Varini's making the argument that we need to pass this bill C-63, in order to fight crime in Canada, fight anti-Semitism in Canada, while the liberals look the other way and completely ignore the violence on the street for pro-Palestine and all the rest of this stuff. The only way to fight that, says Varini, is to pass this online harms bill, which is absolute nonsense, and he knows it. But that's the argument. And then on the other side, the conservatives are making the argument that we should put people in jail who break the law. And I don't think that it's pretty straightforward, right? And I think there's a clear winner. The conservative policy wins in this debate. But holy smoke, Trump's tariffs are the big deal today anyway. And we'll see, because they don't even come into effect until January 20th. So we have time to fix the problem. And because they don't come into effect on January 20th, there's a lot of time, not a huge amount of time, but like months, right? Like a month and more than a month and a half to do something meaningful, to say, listen, incoming president of the United States, we heard you and we're meaningfully acting on this. And he said, if you fix the border, and what he's worried about is drugs coming in and people invading through the porous border in the north and Mexico, south of the United States, right? And I think it's a legit concern. I'm worried about all the people coming into Canada, and I'm not the president of the United States, right? Like, I just live in Canada. I don't even have a responsibility, and I look around and I'm worried. And so it makes perfect sense that somebody like Trump understands leverage. Somebody like Trump, when he has a position of power like the presidency, will use that leverage in order to push and get what he wants. And well, it seems I'm 100% for it. I think that Canada effed around and we found out, and we should stop effing around. And as citizens, we should stop letting the leadership mess around, and we should take things seriously, because if we don't, we're going to have an economic rout on our hands, because Trump's going to orchestrate it and he's going to be right. Simple. Like, it's very simple to me. It seems obvious to me. One other quick thing before we get started, because there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. Some people were complaining they didn't like the dark. So let me know if you like the light or the dark. I have the first 2 tabs light and then the rest dark. I changed it, and I thought they'd all change, but they didn't all change. I have to refresh them all, and I've got like 60 tabs, so I didn't want to refresh them all. So you let me know, and if it's light, I'll switch it back, and if it's dark, I'll leave it where it is. I wish you could change it yourself, but you can't. So let me know what you like. Some people like to read it, right? Like, some people like to read along. So let me know. Like, I kind of like the dark because it made me look all dark. But at the same time, the lighting's better this way. So let me know. Let me know what you think. Lots to get to. Let's get to it. Colin says, breaking, Donald Trump announces one of his first acts as president will be to initiate a 25% tariff on all products coming in from Mexico and Canada. The decision comes in response to Mexico and Canada allowing crime and drugs to pour into the United States. And so he made this statement on Truth Social, and it looks like this. He says, as everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. Right now, a caravan coming from Mexico composed of thousands of people seems to be unstoppable in its quest to come through our country. Our currently open border, On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it's time for them to pay a very big price. Bravo. Thank you. The government needed somebody to slap some sense into them. You know that Batman meme where Robin says something stupid and Batman just slaps him, right? And we need that. Thank you. Slap the government around. 50% tariffs if that's what it takes. And it will be bad for Canadians. It will be bad if the government does not heed this warning, because this is a warning. This is a shot across the bow. This is Trump saying, hey, idiots, smarten up or things are going to get real painful. And I think that he's right. He's 100% right to do this. If I was the incoming US president, I'd use every single power within my power to stop the invasion at the north and south border. And yeah, you have to use diplomacy. You have to use the other countries who are allowing the invasion, who are ignoring it, looking the other way, whistling past the graveyard, whatever you want to call it. But they're responsible to take care of it. And if they don't want to take care of it, fine, they'll pay a huge price. Trump doesn't care, and that's leverage, okay? Paul says, Trump threatens to slap a 25% tariff on all products entering the U.S. from Canada unless Ottawa curbs the flow of drugs and migrants across the U.S. border. The harmful liberal mass migration and soft on crime policies are now an imminent threat to the future of our whole economy. Yeah, I think that's right. Here is Piran Beatty, and Rachel says, following Trump's proposed 25% tariff on Canada, former Chamber of Commerce CEO Piran Beatty says the Liberals have exacerbated the situation. He points to the digital service tax, which the Americans warned us about, but we went and did it anyway. So they warned us about something, nothing happened, and now Trump is slapping us around with it a little bit. And not even very much. It's very manageable, but you don't want to actually have that come into play, right? And it's very manageable. All you have to do is stop the fentanyl production facilities. I also have a feeling that the leadership was given a heads up. Like, this has been apparently a long time campaign promise. Like, I've got Mel Jolie here from back during the election, right after the election, when she's wearing a poppy. Here she is. And she's wearing a poppy, right? So they knew about this 25% tariff. Trump was talking about it as one of the bits of leverage he was going to use on the campaign trail. Like, this is not new and not news. And so they know this. And there have been drug busts in some major BC fentanyl creation facilities over the last couple of weeks. So I would imagine that the response from and the drug busts we're seeing are a response to Trump saying that he would do this and now putting a fine point on it. Like, yes, I'm going to do it. Day one, you better smarten up. And so Piran Beatty says, yeah, we were warned. We've been warned before and we ignored it. So I hope they listen this time. Fingers crossed. Here we go.
The incoming president intends to move very aggressively on a number of different fronts very quickly. And there are things that our government should be doing. The first is that we should be avoiding doing things that make the matters worse. An example of that was the digital services tax that the Americans had warned us about. But we went ahead and did it anyway, and felt there wouldn't be repercussions from that. Mm-hmm. The incoming...
Whoops. Because repercussions are here, right? Like, they thought they had it all sewn up. They were wrong. Margaret McHale Margaret MJ says, and she's a board member of the China Strategic Risks Institute, Senior Fellow Institute for Science, Society and Policy, and a Graduate School of Public Internal Affairs at University of Ottawa. So here she is saying, Trump announces a 25% tariff on all products from Mexico, Canada as of January 20th. The last time Trump gave us a 25% tariffs on Canadian steel, we put 25% tariffs on U.S. steel. So what does the Canadian government do now? Put a 25% tariff on everything coming from the U.S.? Canada will not win a trade war. Not with the U.S. We would lose that bigly. Big lose. It wouldn't be good. It would be very, very bad. There's another person talking about a trade war as well. It's an interview, so I'll get to that in just a minute. I thought it was right. Hold on, I'm going to bring it up. It's the Mel Jolie clip. It can wait. Bill Ackerman says, to be clear, according to Trump, the 25% tariffs will not be implemented, or if implemented, it will be removed once Mexico and Canada stop the flow of illegal immigrants and fentanyl into the U.S. So he's hoping that he doesn't have to actually do anything because it's going to harm U.S. Like there's lots of trade that goes over the U.S.-Canada border, and the USMCA covers free trade. So this is part of the USMCA as far as I understand it, but it would cause problems in the U.S. as well. But Trump is hoping that just the threat of this is enough to get people moving. I think he's right, and we should take him seriously because I think he'd be willing to take the hit and on board. Like he would make a phone if he decided that Canada hasn't done enough and he needs to implement the 25% tariff. He would call the businesses. In my opinion, I think this is what he'd do. I think he showed this kind of initiative in the first term. But he would call those businesses that would be implemented or impacted by that, and he would find an America First replacement. Like he would start interstate trade. He would find a replacement, something or other that prioritized America first. So he would, and like as far as Trump is concerned, that's a win. Right. Like, and I think that from his point of view, sure. Right. Like he's an American president. He's onshoring jobs from Canada, a foreign country, to the United States. Great. Right. Win. And not that he doesn't care about Canada. He told us, he's telling us, right. If we F around, we will find out. And he will call those places and say, oh, I hear you need auto parts, and your company's partnering with a place in Ontario, and that's going to cause a 25% tariff, and that's going to be a headache. And they say, yes, Mr. President, you're exactly right. And he says, well, I've got 3 options for you. Here's 3 other states that have auto part whatever, similar, not exactly the same, but maybe they could retool. Maybe we could, as the U.S. president, maybe I could make a phone call to the state and get some American dollars flowing to that American project, and like lemons into lemonade, right? Like not easy, but easy enough. And people would be on board with that. And do you think those jobs are coming back to Canada? We're being warned. We should listen, right? Like we should listen, but it's a great strategy. It's a great strategy because it's win-win for him. He doesn't care if Canada doesn't listen. He doesn't care if Mexico doesn't listen. He'll figure it out and onboard those jobs. He'll call, say the auto parts are Ford auto parts, just pretend, right? He'll call Ford and say, hey, we've got an auto parts company that's in Canada. They're not playing ball. Can we do that in the United States? And I'm sure the Ford will say, sure, right? Like, how much do you want to give me? And Trump will say, lots of money. Here you go. All that money I'm saving, all that money I'm charging Canada on their tariffs. Here you go. We've got lots of money, a whole bunch of money going around because Canada wants to pay us tariffs instead of fixing their border. Those idiots, right? Like, yeah, I think he's right. Alexa Lavoie says, Alexandra, excuse me, Lavoie, I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry, Alexandra. She says, I just returned from a 4-day investigation at the border. There are many human smugglers who are highly organized, trafficking people, drugs, and other contraband across the U.S.-Canada border. They operate brazenly, even advertising online. This is a serious threat, and Justin Trudeau must take immediate action or step down. Don't miss my 3 reports at guardtheborder.com. So their Rebel News is doing that kind of stuff. So good for them. Glad they're covering it. It's interesting. Still a bit ambulance chasery sometimes, though. Not Alexandra, just Ezra. But we'll talk about him later. Elias says, I wish I could listen to this phone call. I would pay money to listen to this phone call. Mackenzie Gray says, Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump had a phone call today when they discussed trade and security at the border, as per a senior Canadian government source. Prime Minister Trudeau also talked with Doug Ford and Francois Legault about Trump's threat of 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, right? Yeah, so everybody and their dog this is disseminated quickly and people are responding fast. Dave Eby says Trump's tariffs would hurt Canadians and Americans alike. Canadians must stand united. Ottawa must respond with strength. We'll never stop fighting for British Columbian families. Dave Eby wants to prioritize open borders and free drugs. And also, don't you know you'll be hurting us both? He's not playing the game. He's not playing like chess is a couple. You got to think about a couple of moves ahead, right? And like a couple of moves ahead, you're going to lose your rook there, Dave. Kevin says BC leads the continent in fentanyl exports. Trump will get rid of said tariffs if you progressive shits put a stop to the drug trade and secure the border. So what are you going to do about it? Nothing. He's going to have a temper tantrum and say we should respond with tariffs. Nope, that's the wrong move. Here is going back in time right after the Trump win. Mel Jolie explains why Canada will avoid Trump's tariffs. He says, "Do you think Canada will be exempt? Canada is not exempt. Not exempt at all." Here we go.
First and foremost, we've been following the race. We knew it was a tight race, and we had a plan for both a Harris win, a Trump win. And so now we're going to make sure that we connect first and develop and nurture the relationship we already had. So that's our goal.
But Minister, these tariffs, I mean, these are estimated to knock at least half a point off of the country's GDP. That's enough to put the economy into recession. So do you have any clarity on whether or not Canada is exempted from this, or whether it's going to have to deal with this and maybe retaliate with tariffs of its own?
David, I don't want to speculate. We've just been, the results were given at 4 o'clock this morning. The president was talking to the press and to his supporters. So we're around 12 hours after just basically that historic speech. It's an historic election. We know that at least 35 states have as their number one market to export Canada. We know also that there are many jobs on both sides of the border that depend on our two countries. And so we'll be ready. And we are ready.
We don't have leverage. I don't believe that she's ready. Not even a little tiny bit. Like, does she look ready? She doesn't look ready. Her cheekbones are too high to be ready. She uses her cheekbones. She uses them. Look at how defined those cheekbones are. Anyway, moving on. Mel Jolie says, productive discussions with my counterparts from the Middle East and G7 countries on advancing stability in the region. We are focused on building lasting solutions for peace and prosperity in the Middle East. So she's working on the Middle East because, there's 25% tariffs coming from the United States because Canada doesn't seem to be willing to do a damn thing about any of the demands Trump has laid out. Like secure your border and stop making fentanyl and sending it into the United States. We'd really like to continue those things, so... Unbelievable. Harrison Faulkner is saying he doesn't like this. He says Donald Trump's decision to place the same 25% tariffs on Canadian goods that he's putting on Mexico because of illegal immigration is a completely ridiculous and unfair decision. I would disagree. He continues, Canada has an immigration crisis and illegal immigration from Canada into the U.S. is a big problem, but Canada cannot reasonably be considered by anyone to be in the same conversation as Mexico when it comes to immigration. Something else is going on here. Well, it's leverage. It's leverage, right? Could this be a way to cripple Canada and soften us up to accept a worse deal before the USMCA renegotiation? Maybe. On the other hand, he says, if this triggers the Canadian government to finally take real action on mass immigration, this could turn out to be a win-win for the US and Canada. It's win-win for the US. Trump wins no matter what Canada does because he will retool all of those jobs to be America First jobs. Promise you. And he doesn't have ill will to Canada, but if we're stupid, then we deserve it. Right? Like if you get a hot stock tip and you don't put in enough money to actually like pay off on the stock tip, right? You put in $10 and then it goes up 100% and you're like, oh, I made $10. Damn. Like it went up 100% and I only put in $10. Oh, man, if I'd put $100,000 then I would have made $100,000. Right? Like, right? You understand? So it's your own fault. It's our own fault. We're being told, don't do this. And we're doing it because we're stupid. In my opinion. Here's the Wall Street Journal saying Trump fires a salvo on North American trade pact. President-elect signals intention to upend the USMCA, ring concessions on immigration and fentanyl. He's using leverage to solve a difficult to solve problem, and I think that it's a pretty smart move, and I think that it puts the ball in Mexico and Canada's court. And if you play this chess move out, Trump wins either way. So. And will there be bumps? Sure. But there's bumps with anything, right? It's easier to not switch your internet provider, but switching your internet provider may save you a crap ton of money. And so you go through the pain in the ass of sending back the one thing or driving it back to the store, setting up a new thing, paying a bigger bill sometimes, buying equipment, having the guy come out to your house. You could go through that. You'd rather not. right? You call your internet provider and say, I will cancel if you don't price match for me. I will cancel if you don't stop the fentanyl and the drugs crossing the border. And if they don't, right? If they're like, well, sir, sorry about your luck. And I've had people do this. RBC, I'm sure I got somebody fired, maybe one or two people fired. But I went to RBC and I was like, I'd like this product, please. We qualify. And then they said, you don't qualify. I said, if we don't qualify, I'm going to take out all of my money and move my mortgage. Do you understand how much money that is? I said, I'm sure you understand how much money that is because it's on your little computer there. So I'm going to take all of that out if you don't do what I say, leverage. And then they didn't do what I said. And so it was a pain in the ass. And it took about 2 months. But I did it. And it actually worked out better. I paid my mortgage off faster, and there's all sorts of other things that I was able to do with a new banking configuration than compared to the old banking configuration, M1. But it's not for everybody. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is like it's a pain in the ass, and you don't necessarily want to do it, but it may work out better in the long run anyway, right? And like the idiots who don't listen deserve what they get. RBC, right? Like. Duh. It seems obvious to me. I sat there and I said, listen, you may want to call your boss because like I'm talking about a lot of money and we're going to leave. And if we walk out the door, I'm going to initiate the process in the parking lot on my little phone here. It's going to happen, right? And this was like 2010, I think. And they didn't listen. They lost out. Oh, well, not me. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about the GST. And here is GST in 1991. They were talking about they don't want to, the GST people didn't want to implement it. They thought it was stupid. It is stupid. It's insane. It's an insane tax. It doesn't make sense. The whole purpose of the GST, I was saying that it was to pay off the first Trudeau. I think that's what my dad always told me. But they highlight some other things in here. There was reasons for reducing. They did have manufacturers tariffs. They did have prices for, like they did have taxation for manufacturers. So the whole idea here was to bring prices down for consumers while by removing the prices, the taxes on manufacturers. So it was more complicated than just paying for Trudeau. But that's what my dad told me. So here's a little clip from 1991. Here we go.
The tax is taking hold, but there is still confusion.
I don't know what to charge tax on. out of all the clothing we charge on everything, but I don't know how much to charge.
The other common question, just what is taxable? That can be a tough one. Milk in small containers, taxed in this drugstore, tax-free in this grocery store. And some questions about tax logic. Condoms, for example, are taxed. Home pregnancy tests are not. Some Canadian businesses, like this ice cream store in Montreal, didn't tax anything today. The new cash registers hadn't arrived. Ottawa reports record numbers of calls today, about 10,000 to this information center. Among the more common questions, what happens to the price of big-ticket items? Should be coming down, says Ottawa, because there's no more manufacturer's sales tax. And in fact, in stores across the country today, prices were being changed. The businesses, like this Newfoundland beauty shop, are not charging their customers, they're paying the GST for them, making the tax a marketing tool.
We decided we will take the...
So there you go. The beauty shop seemed to be a Scotiabank. This beauty shop in the mall, right by the Scotiabank that we're recording here. Weird. Here's Christia Freeland. She says, we can't control prices at the checkout counter, but we can offer some relief. Kirk says, you can't control prices? The dairy cartel supply management rings a bell? Hello. Anyway, she says that's why we're removing the GST from essential items like groceries, children's clothing, diapers, even toys and games, so you can save money this holiday season and into the new year. And this whole thing is a bad idea. It seems like desperate policy, and people aren't buying it. Usually, though, well, there's a whole little bit on talking about how people are buying it and that people forget the tax implications of the whole thing of adding, because they're borrowing like $6 billion to do this. So paying that $6 billion on our deficit is bad, but people don't connect the two, and they like $250. And they're like, ooh, I did $250 worth, I did this with my $250 or that with my $250, but they don't think about the cost of paying that back later, right? Like, anyway, National Post says, what's Freeland's message to people who are hungry and homeless after 9 years of her government, asks Pierre Poilievre. They just need to get with her vibe? What is she talking about? And of course, if you haven't seen this, I came across this yesterday, and it's one of those things where it's not convoluted. I understand what they're talking about, but it seems like they've come up with this buzzword, Vibesession, in order to lay the blame for inflation anywhere but the reporter who happens to be our Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. And I think that it's the reporter, Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister's fault, really. But she doesn't want to admit it, and so she says it's a Vibesession. You're feeling worse than things actually are. You just can't accurately gauge your emotions vis-a-vis the economy. And I think that she's wrong. Anyway, here's Chrystia Freeland talking about the Vibesession. And I didn't believe her that people were talking about this. And then I Googled it. And I guess they are kind of talking about it, but in a way that makes it seem like they have no friggin' clue what they're talking about. Here is Chrystia Freeland.
The disconnect between the positive news that the numbers are showing about the Canadian economy and what people are feeling. He talked about how Canadians are feeling. And that's a really important economic point. A lot of economists have been talking about the Vibesession and the fact that Canadians just aren't feeling good and that is having real economic consequences. And the Canadian economists making that point are right, that there is a disconnect between the real economic, the really positive economic news, the fact that the Canadian economy does appear set for a soft landing. That's good news.
We have a 70-cent dollar. Like, what?
But Canadians aren't feeling it, and that is shaping their economic behavior in ways that are not great for the Canadian economy. People have been talking about a Vibesession and how that is a challenge for the Canadian economy.
Honestly, people are feeling bad, and so the emotions are overtaking their whole thing. So I looked at this, and I looked up Vibesession, and I started getting lots of stuff from the last day, 15 hours ago, 17 hours ago. But then 3 weeks ago, Vibesession, I thought, okay, NBC was talking about this, June 30th, 2022, the Vibesession. What? I was like, wow, that's an outlier. Like, this is a couple of years ago, this woman was talking about the Vibesession, and it's exactly the same thing as what Chrystia Freeland's talking about now. And she says the Vibesession, the self-fulfilling prophecy, because I had no idea what a Vibesession is. It is a way to shift blame from the printing of money, which is what Chrystia Freeland did as a reporter, finance minister. She just printed money in order to hand it out in curb, printed money and handed out to Ukraine, printed money to hand it out to anybody who wanted it except for people who were struggling and Canadians, right? Like, not them. Anyway, now they're saying, well, I'll go through this because it's the mental gymnastics seem to take a long time. So she says the Vibesession, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Then she says the Vibesession, and we go through all of this to get to the point of here's where the Vibesession comes in, all the way at the bottom. And there's also this diagram, maybe you can call it a diagram, where there's a green wavy line that says reality, and then a blue wavy line that says vibes. And then there's a whole bunch of scribbles on the left-hand side, talk about policy, oil, manufacturing, raw materials. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. It looks like something some crazy person drew up to illustrate how crazy they are. But anyway, I'll read this just a little bit. She says, there's a lot going on, and no one really knows what's going on. If you've already subscribed, blah, blah, blah. Here it is. Oh, sorry, I didn't know where it started. All the central banks had a big hangout in 2022 where they were essentially like, wow, the entire economic regime is shifting from low inflation to whatever this is. Jerome Powell said at the meeting, quote, we understand better how little we understand inflation. And then she says, inflation's moving from a known unknown, or an unknown unknown, to a known unknown. And no, it's not a known unknown. We know what drives inflation. Printing money drives inflation. The government printing money and injecting all that money into the economy drives inflation. It's called inflationary. Adding a tax to the inputs, like a carbon tax and a food tax, inflationary. All of those things are inflationary. It's not unknown. It's very well known, very well known. And this person not knowing, fine, maybe she doesn't know, but it's very well known. People were talking about it ad nauseum as it was happening. People were like, this is going to cause inflation. What happens when the interest rate goes up because of inflation? Pierre Poilievre said, what happens when the interest rate goes up, and how are we going to fight that inflationary stuff? And people said, the interest rate's at zero. Like, it's not going up anytime soon. And here we are a couple of years later, and it's up at 40-year highs. So crazy town. Anyway, goes through some mental gymnastics here, talking about we don't really understand. We understand better how little we understand. Like, honestly, I'm a professional. I've gone to the Wharton School of Finance, and we don't know why throwing money at this problem is causing more inflation, so we're going to throw more money at this problem. Cool, eh? No, you morons. Oh, this bathtub appears to be overflowing, so we're turning up the hose pressure, and we're hoping that this stops it. Turn up the hose pressure a little more. Okay, appears to be flooding faster. Back to the drawing board. You morons. So the inflation blame game, she's got this whole list of things that they are thinking maybe is causing this inflation. It could be COVID-19. Maybe it's Congress. Maybe it's President Biden's CARES Act 3. Maybe it's President Biden's CARES Act 1 and 2. Maybe it's the consumers. They overspent without regard to cost. How dare those consumers throw us into this inflationary situation? 6, consumers shift to good. The Russian invasion of Ukraine. How dare those Russians invade Ukraine and cause inflation for us because of all the stuff we get from Ukraine. The supply chains. Yeah, it's definitely the supply chains. That's definitely it. That's the vibe session. It's the supply chain's fault. The federal or monetary policy, wages or unemployment insurance, EI. Yep. Home shortages. That's it. That's the real thing. All of it together. They're saying semiconductors, corporate profit seeking, tax cuts, and crypto. Okay, that's all the reasons. It's not any of that. And then you get to this point where she says, and this is where the vibe session comes in. So there's all these mental gymnastics, and then this is where the vibe session comes in. So I think all the vibe session means, and I'm sorry that this took so long, but all the vibe session is a way to move the blame from Chrystia Freeland to this long laundry list of anybody who's not Chrystia Freeland. Okay? That's essentially what this is for. It's a buzzword and it's bullshit. And just pay attention for it. When you see it, understand what you're looking at. It's mental gymnastics nonsense. National Post is reporting on Chrystia Freeland says we're in a vibe session and she's got the cure. No. I know what's wrong, everybody. We have to turn the hose up more. Government debt EXE says, watch Chrystia Freeland says Canadians are struggling and it's time to give back. This is the same thing. If printing money and handing it out to people is inflationary, and they want to stop the inflation of the vibe session, handing out more money is the same thing as turning up the hose. Here is Chrystia Freeland saying, turn up that hose, baby. Here we go.
On Thursday, announced a tax break for all Canadians. We know that we can't set prices at the checkout counter, but we can give Canadians a break and help them afford the things they need and save for the things that they want. The Prime Minister announced the Working Canadians rebate. That will be a check for $250 paid in the spring. It will help 18.7 million Canadians, and this is about helping middle-class Canadians, helping them with a little bit more money in their bank accounts to pay their bills and make other essential purchases. We're here really to urge all parliamentarians to join us, to join our MPs and our government in getting this legislation passed quickly so that Canadians can get the break that they need.
I bet the Conservatives vote for this. I bet they vote for it. I bet they say, well, it's better to pass it and have it done quick rather than fight about it. Blah, blah. I bet they vote for it. That'd be weak. If they vote for it, super weak. White North says, do these clowns not realize that $6 billion added to the debt is something Canadians will have to pay back? We have extreme debt. We're running deficits every year. Trudeau is giving billions offshore. So much waste. That is on taxpayers to cover. Yeah, so they can give us $250. It's inflationary, and we'll have to pay it back later. So it doesn't make any sense. And I was saying the other day, whenever this was announced, that I thought that anybody who filed a tax return, even if you made nothing, because when you are a senior, you are still if you have our RSPs or pensions or anything like that, that's income. You know what I mean? And so if you have $15,000 worth of income, let's say you have $15,000 worth of income, right? Then that income is income. And so you make under 150,000, I would imagine that you qualify, and apparently you don't. Apparently you absolutely don't. People were mentioning it, and I said, well, I don't know because it's not clear, because it seems like if you report any income, then you're technically working. But I guess seniors and anybody on EI or anybody who's not actually working is excluded from this, and Jagmeet Singh's trying to fix that, but they're going to support it anyway, which is the most ridiculous thing. You get them to fix it. You don't say, oh yeah, we'll support it and you'll fix it later, right? Oh yeah, we'll fix it later. Sure they will. Like, it's insane. Anyway. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.